I always thought that if betrayal ever came knocking, I'd know. I'd feel it in my gut, sense it in the little things. An unusual silence, a lingering glance at her phone, a change in perfume. But when it finally happened, it hit me like a freight train. No warning, no subtle signs, just a brutal, undeniable punch straight to the chest. It started with something small, almost laughably innocent. A notification popped up on her phone while she was in the shower. "See you soon, babe. Can't wait." A name I didn't recognize, but my gut clenched like a fist. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was one of her friends being playful. But deep down, I knew. I stood there, staring at her phone like it was a ticking bomb. I had two choices: ignore it, pretend like I never saw it, or dig deeper. My hands were already moving before my brain could catch up. I wasn't just going to check the message, I was going all in. Her password was the same. Funny, right? You'd think someone sneaky enough to cheat would be smart enough to change a damn 4-digit code. The moment I unlocked her phone, my world shifted. A thread of messages, stretching back for months. Laughter, inside jokes, confessions of love. My wife, the woman I built my life with, telling another man she missed him, that she dreamed about him, that she couldn't wait to see him again. It was her ex. Of course it was. The one she swore was just a stupid mistake. The one she cried over when we first met, saying how he broke her heart. Looks like she forgot to mention that she'd gladly crawl right back into his arms when given the chance. I don't know how long I stood there, scrolling through every sickening message. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My vision blurred with rage. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, to storm into the bathroom and demand answers. But I didn't. No, that would be too easy for her. Instead, I put the phone back exactly where I found it and walked out of the room. My mind was racing, gears turning at 1,000 miles per hour. I wasn't going to just confront her. I was going to make her regret every single fucking word she ever sent him. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think clearly. If I confronted her now, she'd just lie, gaslight me, cry, beg. I'd seen it before, in movies, in stories. I wasn't about to play the clueless fool. No, I needed more. Evidence. A plan. That night, I barely slept. I lay there, feeling her body next to mine, breathing evenly, peacefully, like she hadn't just shattered my world. I studied her face in the dim light, wondering how long she had been doing this, wondering if she had ever truly loved me, or if I had just been a placeholder, a safety net while she waited for her past to come calling. Morning came, and I played my part, kissed her cheek, made her coffee, watched her as she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. My stomach twisted, but I smiled back. She had no idea what was coming. The first step was information. I started checking our bank statements, looking for hotel charges, secret gifts. I found a few, small things, little cracks in the foundation of her lies. But I needed more. I installed a tracking app on her phone, set up a fake work trip to see what she'd do in my absence. And of course, she took the bait. The moment I left, she made her move. I watched in real time as she drove straight to him. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Right into his arms. That was when the anger turned cold. She had made her choice. Now, I was going to make mine. The second I saw her car pull into his driveway, I knew there was no turning back. Any lingering hope that this was some kind of misunderstanding evaporated. She wasn't just testing the waters. She had jumped in headfirst. I sat in my car down the street, watching through the windshield as she stepped out. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't hesitant. She was comfortable, like this wasn't her first time, like she belonged there. That cut deeper than I expected. But I wasn't here to drown in emotions. I was here to gather proof. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every little detail. Her hand on the doorknob. The way she hesitated for half a second before stepping inside. Like she knew she was crossing a line but didn't give a damn. The way she turned around, just for a moment, scanning the street. She didn't see me. I should have felt rage. I should have been shaking with fury. But I wasn't. I was calm. Too calm. I waited. 30 minutes. An hour. 2. The lights in his house were dimmed. The curtains drawn. But I had enough. I had what I needed. Now, it was my turn to make a move. I spent the next few days planning. I wasn't just going to expose her. No, that would be too easy. She had to feel it. Feel the same betrayal, the same humiliation. First, I gathered every single piece of evidence, screenshots, bank statements, location logs. I compiled them into a neat little folder labeled Truth. I made sure to have backups. Next, I reached out to a lawyer. I wasn't just kicking her out. I was making sure she left with nothing. Our assets? Already being divided. The house? Mine. Every account? Secured. I even found a way to reclaim the expensive gifts I had bought her over the years. Legally, she was about to be left with nothing but regret. And then, for the final touch, an invitation. I planned a romantic dinner. Candles, wine, her favorite meal. She had no idea what was coming. The night of the dinner, she walked in with that same easy smile, the same fake warmth she had been giving me for months. I played along. We ate, we laughed. And then, right as she reached for her wine glass, I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Go ahead, I said. Take a look. She frowned, picking it up, scrolling through the pictures, the messages, the GPS logs. I watched the blood drain from her face. Her hands trembled, her lips parted, but no words came out. How long? I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. She swallowed hard. I can explain. Don't. Just don't. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then, I dropped the final bombshell. By the way, I already spoke to a lawyer. You're leaving with nothing. The house? Mine. The accounts? Secured. Your little affair? Exposed. Tears welled up in her eyes. Please, let's talk about this. I leaned back, taking a slow sip of my wine. Talk? Like how you talk to him. No, I think we're past that. She opened her mouth, but I was already standing up, heading for the door. Pack your things. You've got until morning. She didn't move, just sat there, staring at me, broken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. She thought the worst had passed, that I had thrown my final punch, left her shattered, and moved on. But she was wrong. The game had only just begun. I didn't want her to just suffer. I wanted her to break, to crumble under the weight of her own lies. And for that, I needed patience. I played my part flawlessly. I let her think she still had control, that she could somehow manipulate her way out of the mess she had created. I let her believe, even for a second, that there was hope. I know I hurt you, she whispered that night, her voice thick with emotion. But I want to make things right. Please. I studied her face, the desperate gleam in her eyes, the way her hands twisted together in her lap. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her. I reached for her hand, running my thumb over her knuckles. I want to believe you. She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath. Then let's fix this. I smiled. We will. But in reality, I was tightening the noose around her neck. Little things, small enough to be brushed off as coincidence, started happening. She lost access to her email. Our joint account had technical issues. Her phone started glitching, calls dropping, messages not sending. I watched as paranoia crept in, as the walls started closing in around her. Then, the real cracks began to show. One evening, she came home later than usual. I was waiting, wine poured, dinner set. She hesitated in the doorway, her eyes darting to mine, searching for any hint of suspicion. I gave her none. Busy day? I asked, taking a sip of wine. She nodded too quickly. Yeah. Work was a nightmare. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. Funny. I stopped by your office today. They said you left early. Her hand froze halfway to her glass. Oh, yeah. I had an errand to run. I held her gaze just long enough to make her squirm before shifting the conversation. We should take a trip soon. Get away from all this stress. She blinked, thrown off balance. A trip? Yeah, just us. No distractions. She forced a smile. That sounds nice. I nodded, sipping my wine. Good. We'll talk details later. That night, she barely slept. I could hear her shifting, her breathing uneven. The paranoia was eating her alive. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning, she woke to find her bank card declined at the coffee shop. Her phone buzzing with unknown numbers. A notice of investigation sent to her workplace. All of it carefully orchestrated. She was slipping, unraveling, just where I wanted her. By the time she got home, she was pale, frantic. "Something weird is going on," she blurted. "My accounts are locked. My job, there's some issue with HR. I don't know what's happening." I frowned, tilting my head. "That's odd." "Yeah, and I swear my phone. Someone's messing with it." I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You think someone's targeting you?" She nodded quickly. "Yes." "That's awful," I murmured, watching the panic bloom in her eyes. "You must feel so helpless." Her lips parted, realization dawning. I saw the moment it clicked. Just enough doubt, just enough fear. "What did you do?" she whispered. I smiled. "Sweetheart, why would you even ask me that?" She didn't answer. She just stared, breathing shallow, her whole world tilting. And that's when I knew. I had her exactly where I wanted her. She was unraveling. I could see it in the way she moved, the way she spoke. The confident, manipulative woman I once knew was now a ghost of herself. Jumpy, restless, watching shadows that weren't there. And I wasn't finished yet. I let her think she still had some control, that she could fix this if she just tried hard enough. But every step she took only led her deeper into the trap. "I need to talk to you," she said one evening, her voice strained. "Something's wrong. I can't access my savings. My credit cards aren't working. And today, someone from HR asked to see me about inconsistencies in my paperwork. I don't understand what's happening." I gave her my best concerned look. "That's awful. You think someone's targeting you?" She swallowed, nodding. "I don't know who else it could be." I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe it's just bad luck. A string of unfortunate coincidences." Her breath hitched. "No, it's not." She was close to breaking. I just needed to push her a little further. That night, I sent an anonymous email to her boss with just enough damning evidence to get her suspended. Not fired, yet. Just enough to make her panic. The next day, she came home pale, shaking. "I lost my job," she whispered. "They said they're launching an investigation. That I've been falsifying reports. But I haven't. You believe me, right?" I tilted my head, studying her. "Why would they say that if it isn't true?" Her eyes widened. "You think I did it?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "I don't know what to think anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it, stepping back like she was seeing me for the first time. You did this, didn't you?" I leaned forward, my voice soft. "And if I did, what would you do about it?" Her breath caught. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Why are you doing this?" I stood, taking slow steps toward her until she was backed against the wall. "Because I gave you everything, and you threw it away. You lied. You cheated. And now, you get to feel exactly what it's like to have your world collapse beneath you." She shook her head, whispering, "Please." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "It's already done. You have nothing left. No money, no job, no reputation, and soon no home." She slid to the floor, sobbing. I watched her for a moment before turning away. "You should start packing. You don't have much time." I walked out, leaving her crumbling behind me. The trap had closed, and she never even saw it coming. She thought she could crawl her way back, that there was still a way out, some loophole she hadn't seen yet. But what she didn't know, what she could never have expected, was that I had been setting up this moment for weeks. I just needed the perfect time to spring the final part of the trap. I chose a night when I knew she would try to meet him again. I had been tracking her calls, her texts, her movements. She was desperate, clinging to the last remnants of control, believing he was her escape from the nightmare I had created. So, I made sure their little rendezvous would be unforgettable. She told me she had a meeting that evening, a last-ditch effort to find a new job, to salvage what was left of her life. I nodded, acting supportive, even offering to drive her there. She refused, of course. Too easy. Instead, I let her go, then followed from a distance, my heart steady, my hands sure. I already knew where she was going. She pulled up outside a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people go when they don't want to be seen. I parked far enough away not to be noticed, but close enough to watch. She walked inside, checking her phone, then found him at a small, dimly lit table. Her ex-lover, the man she threw me away for. I smiled to myself. It was time. I dialed her number, watching as she glanced at the screen and quickly declined the call. Predictable. I waited a few minutes, then called again. This time, she silenced it without looking. So I sent the message instead. Emergency. Call me now. I watched her hesitate, torn between answering and staying hidden with him. She ignored it. So I escalated. I called from another number, one she wouldn't recognize. She frowned, excused herself from the table, and stepped outside to answer. Hello? My voice was calm, measured. You need to come home. Now. What? Why? Panic flickered in her tone. It's an emergency. Just get here. She hesitated. I'm in the middle of. Now, I said sharply. Unless you want everything to fall apart faster than it already has. Silence. Then, I'll be there soon. I hung up and watched her rush back inside, saying something hurriedly to him. He frowned, confused, then reached for her hand. But she pulled away. She was already unraveling, already sensing something was very, very wrong. I didn't leave. Not yet. Instead, I waited until she was gone, then walked inside. Her lover looked up as I approached, confused at first, then wary. Hey, I said, sliding into the chair she had just vacated. So, let's talk. His jaw tensed. I don't know what you're. I placed my phone on the table between us and hit play. Her voice filled the small space. Whispered declarations of love, promises, lies. The same lines she had fed me, now regurgitated for him. I watched his face change, the realization sinking in like a slow poison. You think you're special? I asked, keeping my voice light. You were just next in line. His fists clenched. Why are you doing this? I leaned forward. Because I want you to know exactly who you threw your life away for. And because I want to see the moment you realize she was never yours to begin with. He shoved the phone away and stood. Go to hell. I smiled. Oh, I'm already there. I just made sure to drag her down with me. Then I walked out, leaving him to stew in the wreckage. By the time I got home, she was waiting. Pale, shaking, her hands gripping the back of the couch. What happened? What's the emergency? I set my keys down, meeting her eyes. You should sit down. She did, her breath uneven. Just tell me. I sat across from her. Let the silence stretch. Let her squirm. Then I said, I saw you. Her eyes widened. What? At the restaurant. With him. Her mouth opened, then closed. No more lies, I interrupted. You were there. I was there. And now, he knows exactly who you are, too. She paled. What did you do? I leaned back, my expression unreadable. Let's just say, he won't be waiting for you anymore. She inhaled sharply, her entire world crumbling in real time. You set me up? I tilted my head. No, you did that all on your own. She didn't speak, just sat there, broken, trapped in the prison of her own making. And I had never felt more free. She sat there, trembling, her hands gripping the edges of the couch as if it were the only thing keeping her from collapsing. Her eyes darted between mine, searching for something. Mercy, maybe, forgiveness, but she would find none. I took my time, letting the silence stretch, watching as the weight of everything settled on her shoulders. She was trapped. She knew it, and I was about to show her just how deep the hole went. You still don't get it, do you? I said finally, my voice calm. Too calm. She swallowed hard. Please, just let me explain. I chuckled. Oh, I don't think there's anything left to explain. I already know everything. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen before tossing it onto the table between us. The screen lit up, playing back recordings. Her voice, her laughter, the sickly sweet nothings she whispered into his ear. The same words she used to say to me. Her face drained of all color. Where did you? Oh, that's just the start. I leaned forward. I have everything. The messages, the calls, the hotel bookings, every single dirty little secret you thought you could hide. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her fingers dug into the couch, and for the first time, I saw it, true, unfiltered panic. I smiled. And here's the best part. Everyone else knows now too. Her head snapped up. What? Oh, you didn't think this would stay between us, did you? I gestured toward the phone. Your friends? They know. Your family? They know. Your boss? Oh yeah, he definitely knows. That's why you lost your job. She sucked in a sharp breath, shaking her head. No. No, you're lying. Check your phone, I suggested, leaning back with a smirk. If you still have service, that is. She scrambled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. And then, I watched as realization dawned. Notifications flooded her screen. Missed calls. Furious texts. People cutting her out one by one. A strangled noise escaped her throat. What did you do? I stood up, adjusting my sleeves. I leveled the playing field. Tears welled in her eyes. You ruined me. I tilted my head, pretending to consider. No, sweetheart. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the world saw it. She was breathing hard now, her chest rising and falling rapidly, the full scope of her downfall crashing down on her all at once. Her fingers trembled as she gripped her phone like it was the last thing tethering her to reality. And then came the final blow. I walked to the drawer, pulling out a single envelope, then tossed it onto the table beside my phone. Divorce papers. Signed, sealed, and already processed. You have nothing left here. She blinked rapidly, tears spilling over. You can't just. I can. And I did. She let out a shaky breath, covering her mouth with her hand as she stared at the papers. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said, moving toward the door. Your bags are already packed. I suggest you figure it out. Her body shook as she slowly stood, her gaze darting around as if she were trying to find an escape. But there wasn't one. She had burned every bridge, and now she was standing in the ashes. I opened the door, stepping aside. Time's up. She hesitated. For just a moment, I saw something else in her expression. Regret? Desperation? Or was it the bitter realization that she had lost? She stepped forward, stopping at the threshold. Did you ever love me? I held her gaze, my face unreadable. I did. Then I shut the door. And just like that, she was gone. Episode 7. Rock Bottom. She was gone. The moment the door closed behind her, I felt the silence settle in. It wasn't peace, not yet. Just a void where chaos used to be. But I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't walking into a better life. No, she was stepping straight into the abyss I had prepared for her. And she had no idea how deep it went. It didn't take long for the consequences to catch up with her. She had nothing, no money, no job, no support system. Her so-called friends had already distanced themselves. The ones who once gossiped with her now whispered about her. Her parents? They stopped answering her calls. She had burned every bridge, and now she was stranded on an island of her own making. Then, there was him, her ex, the one she risked everything for. I had been waiting for this moment, and when it came, I made sure to see it unfold. A simple phone call, a strategically placed message. I didn't even need to do much, just a little push, and the weight of her own lies did the rest. I watched from a distance as she stood outside his apartment, pounding on the door. Her once perfect hair was disheveled, her expensive clothes now wrinkled and ill-fitting. Desperation clung to her like cheap perfume. The door cracked open, and there he was, her savior. Except, he didn't look pleased to see her. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice cold, arms crossed. She swallowed hard. I need a place to stay, just for a little while. Please." He stared at her for a long moment, then laughed. Actually laughed. "Are you serious?" He shook his head. "You think I didn't hear what you were saying about me? That I didn't find out you were stringing me along while you played house with your husband?" Her face paled. "No, It wasn't like that. Yeah, it was. His tone was final. And guess what? I'm not dealing with your mess. You're on your own. The door slammed in her face. She stood there for a few moments, stunned, before her body started shaking. I saw it. The realization, the crushing weight of reality finally sinking in. There was no escape. No plan B. No one left to save her. She truly had nothing. 2 days later, I heard the knock I had been expecting. I was sitting in my living room, sipping coffee, when I heard the knock at the door. Soft at first, then more insistent. I knew who it was before I even opened it. I let her stand there for a moment, let the anticipation build. Then, finally, I opened the door. She stood in the doorway, eyes red, face hollow, shoulders slumped. She looked nothing like the woman I once knew. "Please," she whispered, "just let me talk." I raised an eyebrow. Talk? After everything? Her breath hitched. "I made a mistake. I see that now. I lost everything. I have nowhere to go. Please, just give me a chance." I tilted my head, pretending to consider. "A chance? Like the one you gave me when you decided I wasn't enough? When you laughed behind my back with him? Lied to my face?" "No, sweetheart. That door is closed." A tear slid down her cheek. "I don't know what else to do. Figure it out." My voice was firm, the way I had to. She blinked, as if she still couldn't believe this was happening, as if she thought she could manipulate her way back in. But there was nothing left for her here. I took a step back and started closing the door. "Goodbye." Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, beg, maybe, but no words came out. And then, finally, the door clicked shut. I turned away, exhaling slowly. For the first time, I felt it. Not just the silence, not just the void. Peace. The house was quiet. Not the tense, suffocating silence I had lived with for months, but a silence that felt lighter, clean. She was gone. The storm had passed. And now, I had to figure out what came next. For the first time in years, I was alone. Not just physically, but in every possible way. No wife. No tangled web of deceit looming over me. Just me, the empty house, and the open road ahead. And yet, something felt off. I should have felt victorious. I had played the long game, orchestrated my revenge flawlessly, and left her with nothing. She was out there somewhere, alone, desperate, unwanted. Justice, right? Then why did it feel so hollow? I threw myself into rebuilding. I worked out more, picked up new projects, fixed things around the house that had been neglected for years. I even started traveling again, something I had put on hold for her. I was doing all the things a man does when he's free. And yet, at night, the thoughts crept in. Not regret. I would never regret exposing her for who she really was. But the question lingered. Did I win? Or did I just lose differently? I heard about her a few weeks later. Small-town gossip is relentless. Someone saw her sleeping in her car. Another said she had tried to move in with a friend, only to be turned away. And then, the final piece of news. She had gone back to him, the man she destroyed our marriage for. Except now, he didn't want her either. I almost laughed when I heard it. The poetic justice of it all. She had burned every bridge, convinced she could always find a way out, only to realize too late that she had nowhere left to run. One evening, I was out grabbing a coffee when I saw her. She looked different. Not in the way I expected. Not desperate, not broken beyond repair. Just smaller. Like the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders. She saw me, too. For a moment, we just stood there, a dozen emotions flashing between us in silence. Then, she walked up to me. "Can we talk?" I considered it. Not because I wanted to hear her excuses, but because I was curious. What could she possibly say now? "I don't think there's anything left to say," I replied, my voice even. She nodded slowly. I just wanted you to know. I never meant for things to end like this." I tilted my head. "You mean, you never meant to get caught?" She flinched, but didn't deny it. "I lost everything," I sighed, taking a sip of my coffee. "Yeah. And whose fault is that?" Her eyes welled up, but this time, I didn't feel anything. No anger. No satisfaction. Just nothing. "Take care of yourself," I said, then turned and walked away. That night, I sat outside, looking up at the sky. I had gotten everything I wanted: justice, closure, freedom. But revenge is a funny thing. It gives you purpose while you're chasing it, but once it's over, what then? The answer hit me as I sat there, alone with my thoughts. She wasn't the only thing I needed to let go of. I had to let go of all of it: the anger, the betrayal, the need to prove anything to anyone. The past was done. My life was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.